Welcome to Indoctrination, a weekly conversation series about protecting yourself from systems of control. I'm your host, Rachel Bernstein.
Hi, everyone. I want to let you know about a novel that was released just yesterday. It's called From the Moon I Watched Her by Emily English Medley. It's a coming-of-age tale that begins in a Texas church during the year 1977. It's a powerful fictional page-turner and is packed with sins and secrets, but then also hope and healing, much like what we talk about on our show. Get your copy anywhere books are sold. Hi, everyone. Before I introduce my guest for today, I want to make sure to acknowledge that this episode is coming out on Inauguration Day in the United States. While I'm recording this a few days before Inauguration Day and cannot predict the events or hopefully lack thereof on the actual day, I know leading up to this day, there is for many people a sense of excitement about a changing of the guard and a new administration, and for others, great disappointment, as they had wanted our president to remain our president. The best that I can hope for is peace. While the usual partisan disappointment or excitement, as I mentioned, about Inauguration Day, has actually given way to something much more extreme and reactionary, with fiery rhetoric and unleashed hatred, kind of torch and pitchfork style. While the looks on the rioters' faces during the siege on the Capitol 2 weeks ago were chillingly reminiscent of the terrifyingly aggressive faces of mobs coming after those who are Black, Jewish, gay, among many others that we've seen who have been attacked throughout history. And this has triggered fear in many and sadness for many that this is our country now, divided and exhausted, on high alert and feeling unprotected. I want to make sure to send out my support to everyone, no matter what happens, whether it is just healing from previous events that have taken place or healing from future events. You are supported and not alone. And hopefully we will, over time, enjoy a sense of possibility and the excitement that comes with new opportunities and new vision after, of course, the dust settles. I know that many people who live in other countries have the common experience of unrest and insecurity around safety on a regular basis, but it is not something the United States has known for quite some time. And it is something that is draining and disheartening, unsettling. The unpredictability, the events that go beyond anyone's imagination, that all can make people feel off balance. So my dream and my hope is for there to be a society we get to live in, and many others in other countries one day get to live in, where things make sense, where there is a certain calm, a sense of justice, power, and safety in equal measure for all. And now, for today's guest, I want to welcome onto the show Stephen Ross. Stephen Ross is from a small rural town called Brimfield in Massachusetts. And he was bullied in school and felt like an outsider and was confused about his sexuality. That, combined with feelings that he was being ostracized by some of his teachers, he dropped out his senior year of high school. He started to realize he was gay. His parents were confused, his mother upset. At 18, he started dating a man and things were going fairly well until he broke his back, ouch, in a snowmobile crash, and fell into depression. And at the time, the person he was dating was going off to college. So he cut Stephen off. One day, as Stephen says, we were together and the next, I couldn't see him or his friends anymore. He then worked at a place with his sister where he noticed she was being sexually harassed and he was constantly being given bad work to do and unfair work to do because the management was extremely homophobic. And then he fell into another relationship. And what followed were 2 years of extreme physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, gaslighting, manipulation. This man broke Stephen's nose, cut his face, bruised him, held a loaded gun to his head. And this man was into Louder with Crowder, the show, and a follower of Alex Jones and Joe Rogan. And that's how Stephen began to fall into conspiracies like Sandy Hook and 9/11. And when that relationship was over, Stephen tried to be alone but couldn't. So he got another boyfriend and he became close with that boyfriend's family. And after a visit with that boyfriend's family on a train ride home, he got the most shocking call of his life. It was from the West Springfield Fire Department, telling him that his apartment had burned down. His cat had been killed. His music equipment and all of his years of work, everything gone. And it was the end of what he called his safe place. And the police knew that his violent ex had done it. His violent ex was the only one who had a copy of his key, and there was no forced entry. And he poured most of the gasoline he used on Stephen's bed. But this man's father was chief of police in a local town, so there was never any justice. Those are just some of the experiences that Stephen went through in his young adult life that caused him to feel disenfranchised and scarred and scared, wanting to feel safe, wanting to have community, and being open to the influence of others who were kind to him. Here's Stephen now. I'm very happy to have Stephen Ross on the show today, who is going to talk to us about his path and his descent into conspiratorial thinking. I think it would be best for Stephen to spend a couple minutes introducing himself and to talk a little bit about what's bringing him onto the show today. Go ahead, Stephen.
I am 27 years old. I'm from Brimfield, Massachusetts. I struggled with my identity growing up. I was in dance class and I got made fun of a lot in school for that. I didn't know anything about sexuality. People were calling me gay in school, and I remember asking my mom in the car, "What's gay?" Her opinion was that it was not right. But that was, I think it was when I was really young. In high school, I felt really isolated. Even like in the musical theater department, which was the safe space, there was a lot of politics and stuff that it just seemed unfair. And then my senior year, I was really struggling with depression. I was late I think I was late 45 days the first half of senior year. I just couldn't get out of bed. My girlfriend was going off to college, and then I had experimented with my best friend Tom, and that blew up and was terrible. So after that, I was like, nope, this is not like what I should be doing. And so then when I started to figure it out and I met someone and I had my first boyfriend, that's like when I left my parents because they couldn't accept it. They didn't really have any good reason. There wasn't any religious reason or anything. It was more so just like they had always envisioned me, like my mom at least had envisioned me being with this girl, Marissa, forever. And like my high school sweetheart, we're going to have kids, we're going to do this and that. All of that trauma and stuff, I wanted to leave that all behind. So I started couch hopping, basically, just so I could get away from my parents. I got taken in by this guy who lived in Springfield. I was really young and naive. He spotted me at the mall, and we already knew each other just from the internet because of my previous boyfriend had been talking to him. he spotted me at the mall. I was working at Abercrombie & Fitch, and he was just like, I want him. And so he was like, oh, you're sleeping out of your car? Oh my gosh, you could live at my place. I just kicked my roommate out and blah, blah. So I started living there, but then and I think I was there for about a year, but he became very controlling. And that's when I called my parents. And by about a year's time, my mom went to a therapist and talked about everything. And at the end of it, she realized, like, this doesn't change anything and I still love him. So we mended things, but we never really talked deeply about anything. But they helped me move into an apartment, which was right next to my sister's apartment in West Springfield. So that was good that we were right next to each other. And they helped me with first, class, and security. And then I was living there for a while. And that's when I met this guy, Sam, who was really awful to me, an abuser, violent, degraded me constantly. Anything I said was stupid or like lame. I went from being like, "Yas, queen," to like, "Sup, bro?" Like trying to mask up for him. This is where the poisoning of my mind begins, because he watched a lot of Steven Crowder's one of them. I hate that we have the same name and it's spelled the same way. Yeah, It's called Louder with Crowder. Alex Jones, he was watching.
Ooh, okay.
Alex Jones has definitely gone off the deep end since. I mean, he was always off the deep end. But
I was gonna say.
And then Joe Rogan, which I personally believe Joe Rogan's one of the most toxic influencers that exists, because he's very cynical and has a very cynical worldview, and is very like, you need to be a man and you need to eat animals, and it's just this very aggressive, toxic masculinity. So Sam, being a gay guy but not wanting to be gay at all, and then seeing me, and if anything I did was gay, it would, put him off, and he would just like give me a look or something. And so slowly, it just slowly wore me away. Our relationship was very tumultuous. He broke my nose. There was this one night, he had guns. He doesn't anymore, I don't think, but he held a gun to my head, loaded, with the safety off, while he was choking me, and he said he was going to blow my brains out. Like, it was that kind of aggression. And I just, it's funny because it's not funny at all, but when I was younger, I never understood abusive relationships, like why don't you just leave? But I don't know, looking back, I'm like, wow, that was an abusive relationship. And I did the same exact thing that everyone else does, which is lie. I said, oh, I tripped and fell. Oh, like about my nose. Because we had gone to New York City for Pride, which is a terrible idea because there's tons of gays. If you're a jealous type, it's not a good idea to go with your partner. We went, and then lots of guys were looking at me and stuff. He was just in a sour mood. And so then we started to argue about that. And then he wanted to leave. And so we got in the car, and then I was crying and he wanted me to stop crying. So he backhanded me while he was driving, and drove all the way home from New York City to Massachusetts, just like blood coming down my face. Still stayed with him, didn't leave. But at least in the area I was in Massachusetts, like, being gay, it's like the only way you meet each other is like on an app, because everyone's hiding. No one is like really being them true selves, and they project a lot of their insecurities onto you and stuff. And so I was just this naive. Forgot to mention I was very sheltered as a kid, and kind of like my parents, for example. I mean, every text I would send, they would know. I don't know. I don't think that software exists anymore, because I'm pretty sure that's illegal now. But there was a time, like when I first got a cell phone, where like my mom would know things I said, and I'd be like, how? Because my phone would never be away from me and stuff. Very helicopter parents. But the reason why is because her siblings, a lot of them got into drugs and have been to jail for drugs. And she was just very worried about us. We lived in the middle of nowhere. It's very common. But unfortunately, that like me never really having communication, never really having friends over, not having communication with my peers, I wasn't prepared for all the red flags. Like, I didn't see red flags. Sam and my parents started to actually intervene at this point, because he got arrested. We had court dates and stuff. So we broke up, and then I started talking to this guy, Patrick. I went on a date with him, but after the first date, I was like, I wasn't really feeling it, but I really was we hit it off. He was into Game of Thrones. He was into Harry Potter, like a lot of the stuff I was into. So I just was like, we can be friends and stuff. And deep down, I like knew that because I think when he responded, when he was like, yeah, okay, that's fine. I'm sure I heard in his voice that it wasn't fine. But I think like, I was so lonely and I just wanted someone to hang out with. And so we hung out a lot. He lived at my place in a way because he lived at his parents' house. And so I had my own place. He really like just wanted to move in with me and be with me. But I met a guy from so many guys, but it's me just looking for someone, right? But I met this guy, Austin, who went to UMass Amherst, immediately fell in love with him. We didn't have a lot in common, but we both really liked science and math and outer space and Tesla and stuff. We at least had that to talk about as we got to know each other, but it got really serious. And then we decided to start dating, and his parents wanted to meet me, and it was getting close to summer. And so we went to Pennsylvania and visited his family. And then we all went to Six Flags, New Jersey, and it was a great time. So that was like 2 days. And then on my way home, on the train ride home, I got a call because Austin stayed in Pennsylvania because he was on break for the summer. And I went back home to Massachusetts because he just was in Massachusetts for school. And I got a call from the fire department that my apartment burned down. And then I got a call from my friend Olivia, who I was house sitting for me while I was gone because I had a cat and I needed someone to watch. And I called her and I was like, are you at the apartment? And she was just screaming on the phone, like, Raiku's dead, which Raiku is my cat. And so I had no idea like what had happened. It's okay. I had no idea what happened. No. It was like, initially my first thought was it was an electrical fire. The police said that there was no forced entry and that someone poured gasoline on everything, especially the bed, and then threw matches in there. And then the police were going through my text messages and they're like, this guy, Patrick, they're like, were you seeing each other? And I was like, not really. And then because I had started dating Austin, it basically just drove him insane. But again, like nothing has happened of this. It's like a conspiracy, right? It's like my own personal life conspiracy because his dad is the chief of police of Holyoke, Mass, which is the town next to West Springfield. He's retired, but he was really respected during his career. And Patrick had never been out of the country before, but the 2 days after, he left and went to Canada and was in Canada for 2 months. So the apartment was gone, right? And so I was hoping that I had some renter's insurance, but unfortunately it didn't cover any of like my music equipment. Like I had a 27-inch iMac. I had tons of speakers and recording equipment and everything. When Austin found out what happened, he asked his parents if I could go with them on vacation because they were about to leave for the Outer Banks, North Carolina. So my apartment burned down. We thought it might be Patrick, but who knows? And then I ended up going on vacation to Pennsylvania. And on that vacation, to North Carolina, Outer Banks. But on that vacation, Austin asked his parents, and I also asked them if I could live with them because I just couldn't see myself going and living with my parents because I still didn't deep down, like I hadn't reconnected with them and I didn't feel like I could be myself around them. And I couldn't imagine it happening. So I ended up moving to Bluebell, Pennsylvania to live with his family. So I was working construction. So August 10th was my apartment burned down. Probably like late August, actually probably in September, somewhere in September, I met Austin's cousins. So on his dad's side, his dad is pretty like devout, and his mother, so Austin's grandmother, is extremely devout. And when she found out that Austin and I were together, she was like, no, this is bad. And her granddaughters came over and basically told Austin and I that it's great that we're friends, but we can't be together, and that we'll never be able to get close to God because the only way you can get close to God is by being as sinless as possible. And if you're as sinless as possible, then you can get closer to his presence and you'll experience him more. And so you have to stop. You may not feel or see any changes immediately, but you have to stop like sinning so things get better. I was still mostly an atheist at this point. When I met Austin, he was going on about God and stuff, but he was like a pothead and he was a nerd, really excelled in school. I think the reason he smoked pot was to slow his brain down because it was just so wild all the time. But I didn't think that anything of that at first, but then I remember there was this one night we were in the basement and I got in a snowmobile crash back in 2012. From the accident, I have almost a slip disc. It's not quite slipped, so I'm still okay and I can still do backbends and stuff. But if I jog or run or something, I'll get like a pain, a really bad pain, especially when I breathe in, if my lungs expand. So I was having that back pain. They're like, oh, we can heal your pain. And so with Jesus, right? They're like prancing around the room, these two girls. Like they're adorable. They're like prancing around the room and they're like, the Lord and Jesus, and like doing that. Then they come over and Austin and the two of them put their hand on my back and they're just praying like for my back to heal and stuff. And genuinely in that moment, I felt this warmth and then I didn't feel my back pain anymore. But that was literally just because the back pain is intermittent to begin with. And I was really depressed and alone, just had an apartment burned down and lost everything. So having three people rub my back and console me made me feel really good. But that was how they got me to be like, oh, that you just felt the Holy Spirit. And now the way you can feel more of that is to stop being gay. There's no detail to that story right there, but that's basically how they were coming at it. Like now when I look back at it, they were like 22 and some of the material they were really obsessed with was like Heidi Baker. Heidi Baker does these sermons where she will literally be like standing on her head and like shouting and screaming in tongues. And she uses that because it's wild. So people are like, oh my gosh, she's on her head. God must be holding her up. Not, oh no, this lady practices headstands all the time.
Yeah, people don't want to know that's performance art, but you're not supposed to question it.
That's the thing is the no questions. Yeah. And I always had so many questions, but that's where this online algorithm comes into play because that's what answered all the questions. We would all be like on our phones, like diving into these conspiracies, like on YouTube, watching these YouTube videos and stuff. And Austin would basically be like leading, I feel like between the two of us, we were basically like leading sermons. And because I think what we really wanted to do is perform. Like I'm a singer and an artist, and a lot of these conspiracies comforted me because I wasn't having any success with my music or anything like that. Oh, obviously, because you didn't sell your soul. The only way you can get in the music industry is if you sell your soul and eat children, which is horrifying. But there's lots of horrible things that go on in the world, and it's not that hard to think that things like that could happen, especially because cannibalism does exist in the world. But to think that that everyone is in on it, and there's just this, that no one, just like the flat earth theory. That was one that Austin and I really got into, which is insane because we were math and science nerds. But we stopped thinking. You stop thinking about facts. Like it doesn't matter as long as it lines up with what you need it to do, then it feels good. But we were seeing that as like God guiding us every time we would feel like that like our heartbeat like increase, which is really just panic. We would interpret it as like a good thing. It's hard to explain. The girl who knocked over like the Target display, and she's been talking about her experience and stuff. She said it's like anxiety porn. And you become addicted to the anxiety. But it's almost, I feel like my brain, it was producing serotonin from it, which is sad because there's so many better sources of serotonin, like sitting down and playing the piano, shutting off the screen and just do anything else.
You bring up a good point about how, well, first of all, how you got into it and how you got influenced, how you were able to be open to that kind of thinking and wanting to also share it because it created some sort of kind of excitement inside of you. And it was probably also some panic, but either way, there can be this adrenaline about it where there's so much that's going on that's wrong and we need to be on top of it. But we need to try to keep ourselves safe and other people safe. And I think that there's the dramatic effect of it. It's so addictive because it's also never ending. Because once you get into this kind of conspiratorial way of thinking, you go into the abyss.
I have so much energy now that I don't like obsess over conspiracies or something. Like I was at a point where I was like, do I just have no energy anymore? And I'm like, is this me? I just but it wasn't. It was like my state of mind was completely defeated. And it's the complete opposite of what we should do as humans. Like, this is natural selection, right? You have to constantly be evaluating things and using as much logic as we can, and being like, if there's not a definitive answer, if I do not have definitive photographic proof, then this can't be true. And I'm trying to think of some of the conspiracies. Oh, the Rothschilds were always part of the conspiracy. There's some family that has some amount of wealth, and I'm great, good for them. But there's a Rothschild that went to school at UMass Amherst, and she was super rich. So that was like some kind of tangible thing, right? There was a person that existed. And Austin asked her about her family, and she gave a very like facetious answer, which I think we took as, oh, she's hiding something. Whereas she was just being like, y'all are idiots.
Yeah, but that's also a good point, because the misinterpretation or the reinterpretation, the way of making things, the false correlations, if she's being cagey, it must be because she's up to something, as opposed to, can you just leave me alone? I get asked that question all the time, and then we move on. I want to go back just for a moment to ask you, because you were talking about talking to these kids and that you were already into this kind of conspiratorial thinking. Was it something that was appealing to you from the start, or were you kind of doubting it a little bit, but you got talked into it? I'm just kind of wondering about your own mental transition into all of that.
Hard doubting every last thing, thinking the flat earth theory was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard. It's hard for me to pin where it's like the chicken and the egg. Is it the radical evangelical Christianity that really set me up to fall for this? Or was it the propaganda that I was absorbing from Alex Jones and stuff and people like that from 2012, 2014? Was that what kind of prepared me to fall for the fake form of Christianity? It's hard for me to say, but most of the theories I would be like, no way. But then I would find, like, David Seaman, for example. I call him out in every single interview because I want him to be held accountable. He was a BuzzFeed journalist, I guess. He got fired for posting conspiracies. That was a long time ago, 2011 or 12 or something, that he got fired. And then he started making YouTube videos about Pizzagate. Daily videos, constantly just saying it was real and just like giving all this evidence and stuff. What seems like evidence. He was very good at, people are good at this, like that it's manipulation, it's gaslighting, and it's lies. And there's some people that are really talented at it. For me, I couldn't just believe any of this stuff from reading it. It took me having this guy looking and being like, this is crazy. I'm in danger. I've had to move locations because they're coming after me for digging this up. And then with there being actual pedophilia and stuff in Hollywood, certain actors have come out about that.
Yeah.
There's like these real things that exist that they're like, oh, so then, and because the material's too gross for me personally to look at, I'm just believing like David Seaman, what he's saying. Okay, yes. What do we do? What they wanted was someone to walk in there and shoot it up. Apparently, because that's what happened. Crazy. The way the media handled that, though, I gotta say, the media screwed the pooch on that one. The way they covered Pizzagate and stuff, 100,000% reinforced and sent me in the spiraling in the wrong direction, because they were like, they weren't going into it at all. They weren't being like, all right, let's actually look at this. They were like, this is just stupid and disgusting. We're not going to talk about this. We're not going to talk about this on my show. We're not giving this any air. And they didn't realize this is a piece of the puzzle that we're all about to see in 2020 come together. I probably would have done the same thing if I was in their position. I would have been like, that is just so disgusting. I don't want to put those celebrities' names next to pedophilia. Like for my article with Nancy Dillon in the New York Daily News, the title, I thought about that one for a while, because I actually gave her, I told her, you can make it clickbaity, because I wanted it to look like the kind of thing that like people believing in this conspiracy stuff would want to click on. He used to believe Lady Gaga ate babies.
What I think is so mind-bending, and we can get into all the other things that are mind-bending, is that there are so many people tied in with these conspiracy theories who are good people trying to do good things. Lady Gaga, for one, right? Who has made such a difference in so many people's lives and is also so generous of her time and her funds. And also Marina, the artist. I mean, she's a philanthropist. And the Rothschilds also fund a lot of wonderful things. And George Soros, poor George Soros, he's this other one who is just a huge donator to liberal causes and to causes having to do with tolerance and acceptance. Right. So what's interesting is that so often what happens within kind of cultic systems is that the opposite is true. The people within a cult who you're told you need to trust are the ones you should trust the least. And the ones who you are not supposed to trust anymore are the ones that actually you should be trusting, like your family and friends or other people. And good is evil and evil is good. And it plays with your head, I think, because it's so extreme in its oppositeness that you think when people are told information that's so contrary to what they think and what they know and what they've learned, and it's said with so much conviction, oftentimes it's more believed in its kind of extremism because you think, wow, that's just crazy. So who would make that up? Maybe it's true, because where would that have come from otherwise? Because I think they hold on to this kind of idea that it can't have been made up because it's so out there. Similar to the whole moon landing being a hoax. You know, where did that idea come from? And it gives people pause and it makes them consider it when it's extreme. And I think it's good for people to realize that. That's them being played with in that way. But anyway, you were going to say.
You bring up the moon landing. That's funny because now when I think about the moon landing, one of the ways I used to justify that it was fake and didn't happen was like, how come we haven't been back to space? And it's just, but now that I looked up some history, did a little bit of research, actual research, it's like obvious that NASA's just been extremely underfunded and no one's been wanting to go to space. We've been really focused on, I don't know, Afghanistan and Iraq and anything else besides space. There hasn't been any funding for it. There hasn't been the desire to go. But then here comes Elon Musk, and he's basically going to start proving flat Earth theory wrong.
Right, exactly. I actually saw this pin. It was posted on Facebook, and maybe other people have seen it too. It's this pin that you can get if you visit NASA, and they might even sell it online. It has a picture of the Earth, and then it says NASA on it, and then says, it's round. We've checked. I love it.
And I have to correct myself because I said, because we can prove that the Earth is round without having to fly to space to do it. But for me, it would have really helped if they're like, hey, this is our satellite and look at this live feed of Earth all by itself. But I recently watched some live footage from the International Space Station, which the live comments on were really sad to look at because so many people were like, this is fake, not real, like Earth is actually flat. And I was like, oh my gosh, yikes. It's not really fringe. I feel like there's a lot of people that think that.
So I'd love to find out about a couple of things. One, of course, getting to the finish line is sort of how you broke free and how you were able to look at things in a different way. But even before that, I'm wondering about two things. One of the things that I've noticed with some of the people I've worked with who are dealing with family members or friends who are getting more conspiratorial in their thinking or getting kind of sucked into it is that they notice the sort of hostility and aggression and superiority, entitlement that comes with the message. And I'm just wondering if you can talk about that, if that happened to you, and why you think that seems to be so woven into these kinds of experiences and beliefs. And how much of this is about the belief and how much is about the connection to other people who believe the same way. And that maybe that's the appeal, maybe in equal measure or more so than the beliefs. So those are my two questions. about getting kind of superior and being aggressive and hostile, and also about if it was about community for you.
Yeah. So I became extremely aggressive. Ryan actually witnessed that because when we were breaking up, I crashed the house. Like I broke our dining room table. I egged his room. I acted crazy, stuff that was just insane. And it was, I don't know where all that rage was coming from until more recently, because similar thing happened with Cody. Our last Thanksgiving, Cody went to his parents and I was here by myself, and I got really depressed. And then I started to gaslight him and be manipulative to try and basically get him back here. And when I couldn't, I went around and I destroyed everything. Like I my phone, I smashed my iPad. I broke just so much stuff. The cats and my dog, I didn't touch them. I would never hurt them, but they like wouldn't come around me for a week, which made me so sad. And I've been having these violent outbursts, ever since Sam. I was such a would never hurt a fly, would never break anything person. But I think after being in an abusive relationship and then me needing to take power back in some way, I would smash things to feel in control. But I think you might mean as far as like aggressive towards other people that don't believe. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, because what I've noticed is that sometimes people will call me and they'll say, listen, I want to talk to my loved one about this. I can't even broach it with them without them yelling at me and accusing me of things and calling me stupid and calling me brainwashed and calling me a sheep. And we just can't have a conversation at all.
I can think of a perfect example because it was oh my gosh, it was a bad night. It was at Austin's house, and his mom and dad, their bedroom is at the end of the hallway, and then the rest of the bedrooms are like down it. Austin has a younger brother, Cameron, older sister, Kayla. But anyways, there's this night where I think Al and Karen were worried about us giving sermons to the kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Al, not like he was, but Karen was like, no, this is bad. What are you doing? Because she has a relationship with God, but it's very different than what we were doing. Like she would never judge anyone for being gay, etc. But she goes to church and she is like a Christian, like identifies as a Christian. But I would say that her beliefs are much different than what we were into. So we're in the hallway, and I remember I was screaming at her. Austin was yelling too. I was screaming. She got to the point where she was starting to yell because she was actually afraid of me. I'm a very expressive person, so I can't imagine what I look like when I'm angry. But I imagine that it's frightening because I don't often look angry. You're almost like rabid. It's almost because I've been going back and forth with some people in my website email, the Debunk QAnon email. And this one guy like was getting pretty hostile with me, but I ended up like helping calm it down because I was just like, why can't we be friends? What's stopping us from being friends? Why are we enemies? And he kept putting things in terms of Democrat and Republican, which for back at Austin's, politics did not start to come into the conspiracies until 2015 going into 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when we started to think, oh, Trump is the Messiah and stuff. But yeah, so Karen tried to talk to us, and out of the two of us, I was the more talkative one. So I was the one doing the shouting and stuff. But yes, that translated over into my life. I just became like an angry person, easily pissed off in traffic, like really road ragey all the time.
And what was it? Was it that, I guess people are sort of wondering, I think, what is it? Is it that it comes with entitlement and it comes with, I know more than you? I have the key to the answer and you don't? And that raises me above you? What is it?
For me, it was frustration that I couldn't save you. Like, I'm trying to help you. Don't you get that? What's wrong with you? Like, this is good. Right? With those angry faces. Yeah, because this is so important and this could save your life and everyone's life. And I'm just trying, and so but yeah, definitely 100% it's pride there. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's pride. I think that's just a form of pride, thinking that I know best. And yeah, because that is thinking I know best. And sit down, be humble is what I wish I had heard like a long time ago, just like, because I wasn't humble at all. But at the same time, I degraded myself mentally constantly. I
Hmm.
love Gaga's song 911. My biggest enemy is me. Papa 911, because it's so true. Like the voice in your head, you can amplify it negative. You can keep amplifying that negative energy, or you can stop it and be like, this is a gross thought. I don't like it. Let me think about my cat. Hi, cat. But it's hard to stop yourself.
Yeah, it's hard. And I think also when you talk about that, I'm wondering if you think you would have gotten drawn in on your own, or if there was something about it being linked to a friend or someone you were seeing or a community that was the draw for you.
Are you saying, was there like a specific community?
And if you had come across these teachings just on your own, hanging out, would you have found them compelling? Or was there something about how people approached you with it and how insistent they were about it, or how they built a friendship around it? Was that the thing that drew you in?
I think it's both, actually, because just conspiracies in general, like they're definitely going to have to teach people in school about conspiracies now, and about they're really going to, because I feel like now I can look at stuff and be like, when your adrenaline is going, you are just looking for the gold at the end, and you're just brushing past all the maybe very important details on your way to get there.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting because I think when you're saying it would have been compelling on your own, and also that there was this community piece, it's interesting to me that it's both. And I think it connects with people who want to do good things too. I mean, there are a lot of people who want to do this to feel superior, but other people who I speak to who say that this speaks to them because it gives them the sense that they're getting to understand that they're being lied to, and they want to let people know that other people are being lied to, and they need to protect the world from this or from that, and how come no one's listening? And what's true, I think, is that we all know that we're being lied to. We all know that politicians lie. We all know that news reports are siphoned through so many different kinds of editors and interpretations that everything becomes, to a certain degree, greater or lesser, kind of a game of telephone. Then there's some people who say, yeah, I know that, so I'm going to try to surround myself with people who I can trust. And I'm going to try to still find resources and sources of information that I can trust. But it's not going to affect me on a day-to-day basis. I'm going to go about my life. And for other people, it becomes, their cause. When you were talking about getting involved in this community, I know you had to pull yourself away from it and away from the conspiratorial thinking. And so I'm wondering how you did it. And also, what has stuck? And what I mean by that is that some of these thoughts are stickier than others, especially the ones that have a grain of truth in them, and the ones that are fear-based, that get under your skin. So, how did you move away from that kind of thinking? And maybe what ideas are you still needing to dispel or work on getting out of your head?
I was doing Uber. I was meeting a lot of people. So that wasn't actively really doing anything too much, but I think it was, instead of being all alone in the log cabin in the middle of nowhere, occasionally meeting people throughout the day doing Uber, but people in Pennsylvania are cold anyways and don't really talk. Going from that to like literally meeting probably 100 people a day, I definitely felt more connected to the world and people. But I started to do this processing, and I was looking for something to blame. And it ended up being my parent. I hadn't thought about all this conspiracy stuff forever. It was not a part of my life. I wasn't thinking about George Soros. I wasn't thinking about cabals and stuff. Whenever I would see celebrities on TV, which I didn't watch, I was not watching TV at all up until really recently, I would just turn it off because I would get a weird feeling. And that weird feeling was the fact that deep down I had all this stuff that I hadn't worked out and I had just shoved down and tried to forget about. Because I was trying to go back to a normal life, and I was trying to be with Cody and everything. Then it turned into, I need to, like, my parents, they didn't accept me. And then that's why I ended up like going off the deep end and falling into this, or everything that happened with Austin. And because my relationship had been good with them, then I wouldn't have left Massachusetts and I wouldn't have ended up with Austin and having that whole situation happen. And so I was just trying to blame them for everything, even though they're literally the last people I should be blaming for anything, because they're literally the ones who like saved my life, got me out here to Texas. But they were the easiest target. What I actually ended up needing to do, though, was I did need to have a conversation with them about how they made me feel when I was younger. I needed to get that off my chest. And my parents were like, even though what happened was I went over their house and I just screamed at them basically for 20 minutes and then left. And then I cut them off for a month.
Mhm.
But that's what really I wish I could have just been like, hey, I need some time for a month to myself, and I also need to get this off my chest. And I could have said it much nicer, but it came out how it came out. Thankfully, they love me and they didn't take it too seriously.
Mhm.
But then the pivotal moment for me, I think, was Lady Gaga released Chromatica. And she had come out with the music video for Stupid Love, and I didn't watch it. I was just like, eh. I was like, whatever. I didn't feel anything. But then I think I had watched Harry Potter. Like, it had been like a month that I hadn't talked to my parents. I was starting to feel a bit happier because I guess I was having a hard time existing because I felt like my parents were watching me still. Like I think because of how much they had helped me move down here and how they had helped me, and they were just very involved in my life again, I was feeling very trapped again. But yeah, so I listened to Gaga's album, and the song 911, My Biggest Enemy Is Me, and then also the song she did with Elton John, Sign from Above. I just felt something. I don't know. It washed over me that I hadn't listened to her since 2014, basically 2013, 14. Because I stopped listening to her kind of like when I was with Sam because he didn't like anything gay.
Yeah.
But then especially with Austin and after Austin, after 2014, I straight up did not listen to her at all, even though she was my identity. Actually, here we go. I still have this book here. It's a picture of Lady Gaga and I before her concert, and we're both holding our hands up like paws. But there's a picture with my mom too. It's weird because her and my mom are the same exact height, and they look like they're both very Italian. It weirds me out. I'm like, I wonder if the Alanginas and Germanatas are related. But
that'd be great.
I don't know how Gaga will feel if she ever looks up my name and it's Lady Gaga and Hillary Clinton eating babies. I'll be like, Gaga, don't worry, I never actually really thought about it. But, so listening to her music again, then after I listened to Chromatica, I was like, okay, I need to go back and listen to everything. And so I listened to Born This Way, and that broke me down because she had performed that. I'd seen her perform that on stage at the first concert, like when I was in the front row, and we were like pointing at each other and singing at each other. And it hit me how far I had fallen. So I was crying a lot listening to Chromatica for probably about a week. I was just listening to it every day, crying and crying. So after much crying and stuff, in June, I got back on Twitter. I had never really been on Twitter to begin with. I had made one, but I never really used it. I was more of a Tumblr person. I used Tumblr all the time. But I had no social medias. I had deleted all my social media, deleted everything because social media is sinful and evil and the devil. And so I made a Twitter and I started following like the resistance, right? Because like everyone is, and I was like seeing all this stuff. I was not involved. I had gotten out of politics, so I was just like, I was getting really excited about it though, and because I think I had started to realize that I didn't know I had been brainwashed, but I knew at this point, and this is early June, I knew at this point that I had been something else and that now I was coming back to myself. I could just feel it. And so I was really excited on Twitter, and I was going around on Twitter debating people like Trumpists, like Trump people. And I was like exercising my debate skills and how to like debate with people and not scream at them or call them names. And it was amazing because I would get called so many names and I would just be sitting there smiling. Like normally name calling would hurt my feelings, but I was just like in this different place. And so I was on Twitter and I was talking to everyone. I was following Andrew Yang people, a lot of Andrew Yang people. I was really into Andrew Yang when I heard about the universal basic income. I was like, that would be amazing because I'm a starving artist and I would love to only have to wait tables like 4 days a week and be able to spend some money. I don't know, spend money on equipment, stuff to help the economy. I don't know. So I was on Twitter again, and this one guy I had followed because he was following Andrew Yang, he made a post that was like, I don't know how these people believe these conspiracies. They must just be really stupid. He didn't say it as harsh as that, but that was what he was getting at. And so then I commented on that, and I was like, to defend these people, like, I consider myself like somewhat intelligent, and I fell for this crap. No one really saw it, but somehow Nancy Dillon came across it from the New York Daily News. So she DM'd me on Twitter, and then I talked to her for 3 days. It was probably only going to be a short conversation initially, but then we started talking, and then we started to realize that I had been brainwashed by something. I really was able to say, wow, I was brainwashed because my whole thinking is different now. I don't think anything the same. So to get back to your question about, is
Yeah.
there stuff now that no, like,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I have the opposite thing happening. Like, I'm watching celebrities and I'm feeling this joy because I'm like, they're good people. They're who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Like, maybe they're different behind the scenes, but like, they're
Mm-hmm.
not eating children behind the scenes. I'm constantly getting this comfort every day. I look at my neighbors and stuff, and I'm not worried about. It's hard to explain, but
Mm-hmm.
there is a
Mm-hmm.
switch that flips, and for me, it was just like, oh shit.
It's really an important thing that you talked about, having a conversation with your parents, even if it was just a yelling kind of conversation for half an hour or an hour. I'll sometimes tell parents, if their child just wants to open up and just go through that, just let them. It's all pent up stuff, and just bear with them. Just listen and listen, because it means that they care about the relationship. And that's why they're doing this, right? Because if they didn't, they wouldn't want you to know their pain. They wouldn't care about it. They'd just say goodbye. They wouldn't want you to know that they're confused about things. They would just shut down. They wouldn't want you to know that they're harboring feelings, or they're wanting you to understand them and be with them with their feelings. So what you want to do for your kids, I think, is just tell them that they can get it out, and that you'll hold on to those feelings and you'll be there with them. And so it doesn't surprise me, actually, that then you made your speech and you left, but then you came back because they didn't argue and they didn't fight with you, and they were just there with you and your emotions.
Now our relationship it's everything like I would hope could be.
Stephen, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. I am so grateful for Stephen, who is able to take his experiences and is willing to take his experiences and share them with people in order to do some education and prevention. It shows also how conspiracy theories can get under your skin, and they're hard to get rid of, and how much they change your life. It also was interesting to hear how more easily influenced he had been because he had gone through trauma and had felt pushed away and isolated after he had had experiences where he felt misunderstood and unaccepted, where something happened to him that was awful, but because the person's father had a position of authority, there was no justice. That can lead people to feeling disempowered, but also feeling like the system is against them. And as I've seen with so many people who kind of take to a particular kind of thought or belief, they're sometimes very devoted to the ideas, but after the friendships fall away that are connecting them to those ideas or to that group, the ideas also seem to fall away, because ultimately they were the things for many people that mattered less, and sometimes didn't even make sense at all. But they knew they needed to come to this sort of belief about them in order to be part of the group, in order to be part of something, and really badly wanted to believe these teachings and believe the people who believed the teachings, because these are people they wanted to stay connected to. This makes me think about a person who I quote often, and also a person who did the afterword for the book 1984 by George Orwell, which I also quote often. The person I'm talking about is Erich Fromm. Erich Fromm was a German social psychologist, psychoanalyst, sociologist, humanistic philosopher, and democratic socialist. He was a German Jew who fled the Nazi regime and settled in the United States. He talks a lot about things like the fact that there is truth sometimes by consensus rather than truth by evidence, which we see in conspiracy theories. In another passage of astounding pertinence for today, he talks about how we witness global groupthink. We elect to have destructive ideas rise to the status of truth. Fromm also talked about something that I mention a lot, which is common customs and beliefs, no matter how absurd, bring people together and save them from isolation. And as we've talked about here on the show, so many people get involved in things to pierce the isolation. And sometimes the beliefs are just that, truly absurd. There's also something that Fromm talks about that is incredibly timely. And here's his quote. What is so deceptive about the state of mind of the members of a society is, quote unquote, consensual validation of their concepts. It is naively assumed that the fact that the majority of people share certain ideas or feelings proves the validity of these ideas and feelings. Nothing is further from the truth. Consensual validation as such has no bearing whatsoever on reason or mental health. The fact that millions of people share the same vices does not make these vices virtues. The fact that they share so many errors does not make the errors to be truths. And the fact that millions of people share the same forms of mental pathology does not make these people sane. I love that quote. It is, as I said, incredibly powerful to me when somebody's words from decades ago, sometimes even hundreds of years ago, sound as if they had been written that morning because they are so connected to what is happening in the world right now, which makes me think of the quote, "There's nothing new under the sun." And just as Erich Fromm had done the afterword for George Orwell's 1984, which had a vision of a dystopian future, as did Orwell's novel, especially Animal Farm, I am determined to do what I can to make sure that the future does not resemble that of these dystopian visions. Let's all partner together to make sure of it. Talk to you next week. Thanks again for listening. Tired of ads? Well, listen or download this show for free on NPR's Radio Public app, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. Please support Indoctrination at patreon.com/indoctrination. We have over 100 interviews that you can access with any donation. Subscribers receive bonus interviews and other cool goodies. And we love hearing from you too. So send us an email at indoctrinationshow@gmail.com. Thank you for your support.